all about gamesmanship. It's all about politics instead of the people who expect more from us.
This week in Pennsylvania, House Republicans accused Democrats of holding session not to legislate, but to create fodder for negative ads. Former Governor Ed Rendell goes public with a warning about a possible third-party presidential candidate. And Pennsylvania's junior senator gets major airtime on the late-night comedy circuit. Hello and welcome to This Week in Pennsylvania. I'm Dennis Owens. We're covering hot topics in PA policy and politics, as well as the issues important to you and your family. Fair or foul? We're not talking baseball, but rather political hardball. House Republicans are complaining after Democrats sent negative ads and texts immediately following last week's bizarre fight over a bill that would move PA's primary election. The bill failed, but it may have succeeded in giving Democrats campaign ammunition. There was screaming Wednesday night.
What happened tonight on this floor is an insult.
Which gave way to singing Thursday morning.
Democrats are here on their feet passing.
And then an election reform bill loaded with unpalatable amendments for both sides that went down to defeat by a whopping...
The yeas are 26, the nays are 177.
A weird chapter that Republicans say began making sense to them come Friday.
After seeing some of the text messages that have been sent today, it makes me think that it was all for politics.
Negative texts targeting several House Republicans like Kristen Marcel sent by the House Democratic Campaign Committee, blasting them for their votes on that election bill.
How they wasted not only our time in voting, but the people of the Commonwealth's time on purely political votes.
Especially egregious, Marcel says, a text ripping Philly Republican Martina White for voting against voter ID. Fact is, White supports voter ID, but voted no because of those other amendments. Fact is, by and large, it's the Democrats that don't support voter ID. So aren't all those texts disingenuous?
These attacks and these messages that get out are always disingenuous.
Nick Piscitano is vice chair of the PA-HDCC, which sent those texts. He calls himself proudly pro-labor.
Do you know how many texts and postcards I've got in my mailbox from dark money groups that say that I hate working people? It's all disingenuous.
Do you understand how all that disingenuousness just turns the average voter off?
Yes, it's toxic to our whole system of government, and it's awful.
But he adds it takes two to tango, and Republicans are pretty skilled on that dance floor.
We're not going to unilaterally disarm and let the Republicans and their right-wing allies, be disingenuous about us without us punching back.
But Marcel wonders, with all those punches, isn't everyone getting a black eye?
This is one of the reasons why people don't like politics, and it's really a shame.
Okay, as for moving Pennsylvania's primary, the House killed the March 19th date with all those amendments, but passed a clean bill to make it April 2nd. The Senate responded this week by saying it rejects that, and the only chance to move it off of April 23rd, which is the first day of Passover, is for the House to pass the March 19th bill. And counties this week sent a letter saying it's now too late to move it at all because of the preparations that they would need to do. We'll keep you posted. Another week, another Democratic candidate into the race hoping to unseat controversial Republican Congressman Scott Perry, who represents Harrisburg, York, and the suburbs surrounding them. Dems clearly think Perry is vulnerable. There are 5 announced candidates and more coming. The latest is a longtime TV anchor. Janelle Stelson has spent the last 4 decades working for 4 TV stations that broadcast in the district. She faces challenges to winning over Democratic primary voters. For one, she was a registered Republican until last year. Critics also note that she lives adjacent to, but not in, the 10th Congressional District. We asked her about that. Will you move here?
Right now, I'm just trying to launch my campaign. I lived in New Cumberland. I lived in Camp Hill. I don't think anybody can make the argument that I don't know the 10th in and out.
Perry, a 6-term incumbent, has not acknowledged the other candidates by name, but did with Janelle. And in a statement, the campaign said Ms. Stelson is just one more Democrat auditioning to be Joe Biden's running mate, supporting a radical woke agenda. Former Governor Ed Rendell is warning about the impact of third-party candidates on next year's presidential race. Rendell is with the bipartisan group Citizens to Save Our Republic, which does not discourage third-party candidates from running. However, the group says it has polling data that shows if Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, a third-party candidate could get as much as 20% in PA, handing the state to Trump. Rendell does not want to see that happen.
I think Donald Trump has forfeited his right to be president of the United States. I say that somewhat advisedly because I never believed anybody would forfeit their right. But I believe Donald Trump was guilty of treason, guilty of trying to overthrow a lawful election.
Rendell pointed to 2016 when Green Party candidate Jill Stein got 49,000 votes in PA. Hillary Clinton lost the state to Trump by 44,000. And just this week, Robert Kennedy announced that he is running not as a Democrat, but as an independent. U.S. Senator John Fetterman was trending this week after appearing on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. While there, he talked about his public mental health challenges. Earlier this year, the Democrat took a leave of absence to be treated for depression less than a year after suffering from a stroke. Fetterman says he is doing much better now, but that was not the topic that went viral from Colbert. It was instead this talk about his own colleagues.
You all should need to know that America is not sending their best and brightest, to Washington, D.C. Yes. Like, sometimes you literally just can't believe, these people are making the decisions that are, determining the government here. You have some very less gifted kinds of people there that are willing to shut down the government just to score points on Fox.
On the show, Fetterman also said he never asked for the Senate dress code to change. You see, he's wearing his traditional hoodie and gym shorts. Pennsylvania's funding of its public schools is unconstitutionally inequitable. We're going to have the two lawmakers tasked with fixing it on this show. It's coming up next. Welcome back to This Week in Pennsylvania. We are very excited to be joined by Republican Senator Kristen Phillips-Hill of York County and House Democrat Mike Sturla of Lancaster County. And this is bipartisanship. The Democrat's wearing red with red shoelaces even, and the Republican is wearing blue. Thank you both for being with us. You two may have the toughest job in the state right now because Commonwealth Court ruled earlier this year, as you know, that the way we fund our public schools is constitutionally inequitable. And you are the co-chairs of a commission tasked with figuring out what the fix is. You're going to do 10 public hearings across the Commonwealth. You've already done 8 of them. First, I'd just like to start with you, both of you actually. What is your biggest takeaway from what you're hearing?
Well, I think it's important to note that the Basic Education Funding Commission is statutorily required to meet every 5 years. The last time they released their report was 2015. We were supposed to meet in 2020. COVID got in the way of that. Governor Shapiro tasked us to meet again and to evaluate if the basic education funding formula that we have is meeting the needs of our students and school districts, assuring that thorough and efficient education. Subsequently, as you noted, lawsuit was filed, decision came down, and that has gotten mingled into the statutorily required work that this commission is tasked with. And we're hearing a lot. We're hearing from key stakeholders all across the Commonwealth. And I think one of the things that we've noted is it is going to be a challenging task. And as I've said to all of our colleagues who serve on the commission, we need to listen. We're going to hear things we like. We're going to hear things that we don't like. But everything's on the table, and we have to keep an open mind. And we are hearing conflicting testimony, particularly around certain aspects of the funding formula. Do you retain the hold harmless provision in the base funding formula? Do you eliminate the hold harmless provision in that base funding formula? And
I want to go back to that in a minute, but your big takeaway on one of the things that came out relatively early, an expert says we are $6 billion underfunded. And we should note that every year for the last several years, record increases in public school, including another $500 million extra this year in this budget. But they're saying you need $6 billion on top of that. But what's your big takeaway?
Well, I mean, the record funding that's been coming in the last couple of years has literally just kept us at pace with inflation and tried to catch us up from the $1 billion that got cut back in 2010. So we're back to where we were basically at 2010 plus inflation. So we didn't really change a whole lot in terms of what's available to school districts. And the court said, look, you need to work on adequacy, you need to work on equity. And those are two issues that are in some cases seemingly hard to define, but I think we have benchmarks by which we can measure them. If we can measure adequacy and equality or equity, we will be able to get through this with a formula that at least will meet constitutional muster. There's still a question of whether we fund it or not, but I think we can come through with a formula that will meet the criteria necessary.
And Dennis, let's go back and talk about this number that we're hearing bantered about. So when we took testimony, the plaintiffs had a numbers guy from Penn State University, Dr. Kelly. It's important to note first that Dr. Kelly was paid by the plaintiffs to crunch the numbers for them to make their case. So he is the person with the plaintiffs and their numbers.
Well, I imagine he's going to produce the numbers so you can look at how he crunched them.
He first testified that that shortfall was approximately $4 billion. He then testified before the commission that it's $6 billion. And we've had various different numbers thrown around since then. And I think it's important to note, again, that we will not be putting forward a specific number, but a formula. And we have to make sure that we determine what those factors are, and that decision on the dollars is going to come from the General Assembly. Next week, 2 weeks
November
from now,
2nd.
we will be in Enola. And we are going to finally hear from those people that signed the front of those checks, the taxpayers, the businesses who pay those taxes to fund our system of education. And don't forget, Governor Wolf, when he was asked about his significant accomplishments as governor here in Pennsylvania, he touted record education funding. Governor Shapiro has talked about the record education funding. So we need to look at how the money goes into the system, how the money's distributed, and the outcomes we get for the investment.
I do want to say numbers are funny things and you can do different things with them, right? So when it comes to per pupil spend in Pennsylvania, we're 6th in the nation.
Because of high local taxes.
Correct. But when it comes to the amount of money that the state is giving, we're in the bottom 5.
Right.
What do we make of that? It doesn't take a judge. All you have to do is drive around the Commonwealth, go to one of the beautiful suburban districts, and then go into one of the inner cities, and you can see it's an inequitable education.
Yeah. Not only are we low in terms of what the state puts in, but when we first started in on this thing back in 2013, they rated states by which ones have the most inequity between what is the poorest district and how much are they spending on students, and what is the wealthiest and how much are they spending on students. We didn't just rank 50th because they included the District of Columbia. We ranked 51st. We were the worst in the nation.
So you two are well on your way to fixing this whole problem, right? We're well on our way to taking a quick break, but we're coming right back on This Week in Pennsylvania. Welcome back to This Week in Pennsylvania. Crowded house here today. We have Senator Kristen Phillips-Hill of York, and we have State Representative Mike Sturla of Lancaster. Thanks so much for both of you for being with us. And we have our analyst, Danielle Gross, ClearPoint Communications, Christopher Nicholas, the Eagle Consulting Group. Danielle, you have a question for the senator.
Sure. We were just talking about the burden of property taxes. And if the Basic Education Funding Commission were to tackle, as a result of this ruling, both to determine the amount of the funding that each district requires to reach an adequate funding level, as well as how much money of that should come from the state, it would go a long way in taking a huge first step towards property tax reform. Do you think you or any of your colleagues on the commission have any appetite to address any kind of property tax reform in that way?
So I think that we would be remiss if we did not look at that aspect of the challenges that we face in the Commonwealth with regard to how we fund our system of public education. And I said it earlier, but that court decision that came down didn't just talk about the amount of money, it talked about how that money was collected and how that money is distributed. And I don't think you can have that conversation without looking at local school property taxes.
Christopher.
Thanks for being with us, folks. Representative Sturla, if somehow this commission reaches nirvana, finds the unicorn, gets this formula all figured out, essentially it'll mean that wealthier school districts will be prohibited, at least for a while, from spending what they want to. So what do you say to parents and kids in those districts who pride themselves on having stellar local education systems when your commission's going to come in and kind of put the kibosh on some of that?
No, that's incorrect. There's nothing in any report or anything that we intend to do that would prohibit somebody from spending more. What we're trying to do is reach adequacy. So think of the easy, sort of simple way to think about this is, think about you've got a kid that's 6 feet tall, one that's 5 feet tall, one that's 4 feet tall, and one that's 3 feet tall. And they're trying to look over the fence. The kid that's 3 feet tall needs a 2-foot stool to stand on so they can see over the 4-foot fence. The kid that's 4 feet tall needs a 1-foot stool so that they can look over the fence. Kid that's 5 feet tall can look over the fence. So can the kid that's 6 feet tall. Nobody's requiring that the kid that's 6 feet tall stoop down a foot. It's just that we're trying to get everybody to an adequate point where everyone can see over the fence. Right now, there are kids in Pennsylvania that are that 3-foot tall kid, and they never have a chance to see over that fence. And that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Are we overly reliant on local school property taxes for the big pie, and what's the answer to that?
Well, I think we're overly reliant in some of the poorer districts because we don't fund enough. Look, if you're a wealthy district and you have families that are willing to spend $30,000 a year to send their kids to a private school, and you say, I'm going to tax you and you're going to pay $25,000 in taxes, they say, that's a bargain. You get into another district where people don't have enough money to put food on the table, and you say to them, how'd you like to spend $10,000? And they go, where's it coming from? I only make $30,000. You can't, there's no way I can possibly get there.
Your thoughts on the local school property tax reliance? Because clearly, as I said, you go to these nice suburban districts that are great. You go into some of the inner city where some of the buildings were built in the 1800s, and it's not so great.
I think clearly it is a key component to the inequities in terms of how taxpayers are treated and how school districts are funded. And I will harken back to the first vote I ever took on legislation that would eliminate property taxes and replace it with sales tax and income tax increases. And I looked at the board, it was in the House, and I couldn't believe who I was casting votes with, because these are people I don't usually vote with. But it was simply a reflection of those geographic challenges. We know we're overly reliant on the local school property tax in York County and Monroe County and other places. And so it makes for strange political bedfellows. But again, we need to treat students equitably and taxpayers
Quickly,
equitably.
what's the sense of urgency? When are we going to have a report from what you guys have learned from all these things?
Well, we're supposed to have a report done by the end of November. We got a late start on things. I think that we've come to an agreement sort of on the side to say if we get it out by the middle of January, that gives the governor time to process.
So he'll be
this.
able to react possibly to start to fix this thing by his next budget?
Yeah.
Okay. I got to thank both of you. Keep doing the great work. We appreciate it. I know it's not easy work. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Stay with us. Much more This Week in Pennsylvania when we come back. And welcome back to This Week in Pennsylvania. We have our analysts, Christopher and Danielle. And, you know, we were just talking about school funding, which might be the most monumental and difficult task, Herculean task they're trying to figure out. Not so hard, in my view, is just moving the primary date. Simple little thing.
So 3 years out of 4, Dennis, our primaries, third Tuesday in May. Presidential year, we move it up to the fourth Tuesday in April. Through no one's fault, that conflicts with a Jewish holiday. So the governor, who is Jewish, and everybody else wants to move it. Of course, the House and Senate can't really
Well, that was
decide.
my point. All they had to do was pick a date. March 19th, the Senate passed it overwhelmingly,
Well,
sent
they
it over
can't-
to the House.
They can't agree on what day of the week it is, Dennis.
Well-
You really expect them to figure out March 19th, or I think the other date is April 2nd or April 3rd. So my big kind of against the grain idea is let's move the primary back. Let's move it back to the third Tuesday in May like it is the other 3 years out of 4. That'll give everybody enough time, the election administrators, enough time to get over the general election and get ready for that.
But then Pennsylvania voters, Pennsylvania Republicans would really have no hand in picking whoever the presidential nominee is going to be.
I think that's going to be more of a slow roll next year than it has been in the past. But
Yeah, it's
you may differ.
way too late. It somehow fell apart monumentally, and it's way too late to move it any earlier. The counties would just be not able to keep up with the
well,
vast
people
rate
would
of
be
changes.
going to get petition signatures
Right,
during
over the
holiday
holiday
week.
season.
Nana can't stay and play with me because she has to go out in the snow and get petition signatures up and down the street. That's just a bridge too far for most people.
Well, and if it were a Christian holiday that the primary fell on, I mean, I have a feeling this would have gotten fixed a heck of a lot earlier. It really is a shame that a major holiday.
That's why I say,
Having said that, we do have mail-in ballots. That's an option.
That's why I say let's
vote
move it
3 weeks early.
That's why I say let's move it back. That way we don't conflict with anyone's holidays.
We saw former Governor Rendell for the first time in a long time this week, him talking about the danger of a possible third-party candidate. And then, of course, Kennedy announced he's going to run as an independent. Are Democrats frightened of that? Although in this case, I've actually seen some analysis that he would hurt Trump more than he would hurt Biden.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it seems. He might have the Kennedy name, but he certainly is not a mainstream Democrat. Even his siblings came out with a statement condemning his candidacy.
So the former Green guy, Cornel West, who's a professor at Harvard, he's going to run as an independent. That would hurt the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden. RFK Jr., right, he's a junior, would hurt Trump more if Trump is the Republican nominee. So the battle will be each party trying to get the other side's worst enemy as an independent on the ballot. And that's kind of the normal part of the dance.
Mm-hmm.
And is this to be expected when the two candidates are, I believe the polls are 70% of the American public don't want these two to be our nominees?
It's going to be the third presidential election in a row, 2016, 2020, and 2024, where a majority of people wish we could find somebody out of the phone book if we still have phone books.
Any thoughts?
I got nothing.
Oh, what you do. We're about out of time. There's certainly want to thank you very much for joining us. Sure hope to see you next week and on This Week. And if you missed the show, thisweekinpennsylvania.com, you can see them all. Go check it out. Have a great week.